What's up everybody, Maran here for another car review. This is of course the all-new 2019 Kia Forte. Huge thanks to Kia for providing me with the brand new Forte here to review for you guys today. So about the Forte, well, it's clearly got a lot of Stinger influence here for this 2019 restyle, and man, it looks good. I personally really like the way this looks. I think it's very distinctive and unique, while still looking bold and exciting. It's just a great look though. I don't think it's overdone or anything. It looks really nice, especially, you know, you have this Stinger influenced grille. Even the headlamps I like the little 4 LEDs you have in them. It almost looks kind of like a Porsche element, but this kind of goes out a little bit further and you know, has its own unique take. Looks really good. I also love all the gloss black finish you have here. You know, in vehicles in this class, you know, sometimes you get some cheaper plastics on the outside here, but it's all, you know, expensive looking gloss black finish there for the lower part of the front bumper there, where you'll see the turn signals, and it just all looks very sporty. Again, we're talking about the standard Forte here, not a sport version, regular Forte, and it looks really nice and aggressive. Coming down to the sides here, you have these nice grayish 17-inch alloy wheels that look pretty good here, and you know, the whole vehicle, you know, from the side profile especially, and you can tell it's a little bit longer. It's actually a little bit wider too when you look at the front, and so it gives it a more athletic, a little sportier of a stance as well, which I think is you know, really nice looking. And then going out back there, I really like the way they did this tail lamps. Very upmarket, looks like a lot of luxury brands in some ways. I really like the little strip that runs across the middle there. I also like you've a chrome finished exhaust tip there, and more gloss black trim. You know, sometimes you have it in the front on other vehicles but not in the back. This does have it in the back as well, so it is nicely uniform with the front look, and looks really nice and blocky there in the back too. Again, very sporty for, again, just a regular version. I'm excited to see. Hopefully there will be a faster version. It seems like spy pictures are suggesting that, and that should look even better. But even in the standard Forte trim here, I think it looks really good from just about every single angle. Whereas for the interior of the all-new Forte, well, it's a very nice place to be. Anyway though, first thing, sitting down in these seats, you have some pretty good seats here for, again, a regular you know, compact sedan. They're really sporty. They're leather here in the EX trim as well, which is really nice, and they have really great torso support. Really, you know, good sized bolsters for a vehicle of this class. The thigh support is on par with the average for this class. I wouldn't say it's as great as the torso bolstering, but still pretty good thigh support there. One thing that is outstanding though is these seats in this fully loaded EX version with this option package has the heated and ventilated seats, and they are some of the best cooled seats I've used in a vehicle. Kia does a really good job usually in general, but these ones just are really good. I think Kia is one of the few that have mastered actually getting them nice and cold. The seat bottom and the seat back both get nice and cold, and on a very hot day like today, it's currently 91 degrees, that is very much appreciated. So excellent job there by Kia on the cooled seats. Next, the steering wheel here in the Forte, which is really nice. Again, just feels much more expensive than what you usually get in something of this class. So yeah, it has a really nice 9-3 grip. Nice, pretty large 10 and 2 notches too. It's a nice sporty looking and feeling wheel. You have some metal accents here down towards the bottom of it that look very attractive, and even these buttons here, which are plastic I believe, but you know, look and kind of feel like metal. And you know, again, this is all kind of very similar to the Stinger in a lot of ways. Obviously not quite as nice, but it does a pretty good impression, you know, for a lot less money. And you just have your few basic buttons here to go along with those little rocker switches. Unfortunately, there aren't any paddle shifters here, even in the fully loaded EX version. Hopefully that would be in a sportier version someday, but you can manually shift the transmission here through the gear shifter. Next, the gauges here in the Forte, which are pretty good. Nothing to write home about, but nothing really bad either. You know, you have pretty similar fonts to what you see in like the Optima and stuff like that, which are, you know, a little bit of a cooler looking font, but just your basic gauges there. In the middle there you have a screen which looks like it's black and white, but there is actually a little bit of color. But since it's a color display, I wish they would have actually shown, made it a little more colorful instead of just making it black and white. But anyway, it does your basic trip information, and that's about it. There isn't any kind of, you know, media information or anything like that in there. And again, you know, that would have been forgivable a couple of years ago, but these days, you know, with stuff like the Corolla IM now having a large digital display there for the gauges, you know, and even the Civic, you know, they have those digital displays. It would be nice to see something at least a little bit bigger, maybe even, you know, what the Stinger offers, where you have a large middle portion there that's digital instead of the small one. But again, for the class of vehicle we're in, I would say, you know, still there's many that also only have about this same type of content, and so overall, you know, still I guess average for the pack. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, though, this is where there's some stuff that is definitely above average and much better than what you usually get in this class. So up top, you have the standard 8-inch infotainment screen with standard Apple CarPlay, standard Android Auto. And this 8-inch screen you even get in the base trim. And most of the other competition, you don't get a screen this large. And if you do get it, it's in a higher trim. A lot of them don't have CarPlay as standard because they're not even touchscreen as standard. This has all that as standard. Really a nice high resolution display here. I really like the Kia infotainment system. It's very simple, just touchscreen, just a few basic things. It's not super feature packed with a million different menus. It's just very straightforward. You have the little shortcuts here, a row of buttons for media, radio, all that type of stuff. Thankfully, you do have a volume and tune knob, so very easy changing radio stations. You don't have to fiddle with any kind of button pressing other than just twisting the knob, which keeps it nice and simple. And so overall, a really nicely done infotainment system. Coming down, you'll see your standard auto climate control. That is something none of the competition offers, is standard auto climate control. So even if you get a bare bones base Forte, you get dual zone automatic climate control and an 8-inch touchscreen, which is a really impressive offering for this class. And so anyway, nice climate control system here, just with the red illumination here. As far as storage space here in the Forte, it's really good, right up there with some of the best in class. So first off, in the doors here, you have a large map pocket with a bottle holder. Coming over to the center here, you have two different levels of storage. Up top here, if you have the fully loaded EX, you have a Qi wireless charging pad, which is really nice to have to give your phone a little bit of extra charge there while you're driving. Otherwise, that would just be a normal shelf. And then coming down, you have this deeper cubby, which can fit, again, very large smartphones or just several different items in there. Really a nice large amount of space. I think only the Civic outdoes this as far as front seat storage space. But anyway, in this cubby here, you'll have a standard traditional power outlet. You'll have two USB jacks and an auxiliary jack. And so a really nice amount of hookups all right up front there. Some of the competition, again, makes you go into the center armrest or something. This, it's all out in the open, which I really appreciate personally. And then you have this very nice gear shifter, which again looks similar to what you see in the Kia Stinger, and just has this nice smooth leather on top of it, metal on the sides. You have the metal trim around it here, and it all feels really solid too. Everything in here feels really nice and solid. And although speaking of the materials and stuff, you do have some nicer feeling materials that are still hard, but a little nicer looking up on the top of the dashboard. But then all you have to do is go beneath this chrome trim line, and then you will see a more harder, cheaper looking plastic. But again, you have to remember the class of vehicle we're in, a vehicle that starts, in just under $18,000. So to have the cheaper plastics is totally, I think, acceptable. And they do kind of jazz it up a little bit nicer. For example, where your knee would rest here by the transmission tunnel area, they have that painted gloss black, and it's smooth and feels a lot nicer than, some of the cheaper black plastic that comes further down here. And stuff like the e-brake handle still isn't wrapped in anything. It's just more hard plastic. But I think, again, that's totally forgivable for the class or vehicle we're in. Anyway, coming back, you have your two cup holders here, which are pretty good size, not huge, but should be more than enough. And then you have the center armrest, which is nice and softly padded, but it's just this rubberized, really kind of rough vinyl, though, unfortunately. So although it has padding to it and some give, it just feels kind of cheap, unfortunately. Now, they did improve this armrest over the previous Forte, they said, so that now it's a little bit higher and actually does slide forward, so you can have it, so it's a little more usable and not quite as far back. So that is a nice improvement here. I just, again, wish they would have made it a little bit nicer as far as material on here, or even put cloth on there. I think would have felt a little bit better. Anyway, you open that up, and then you have a pretty deep cubby. It's not super deep, but a decent amount of space. You can easily fit, lots and lots of stuff in there. And you also have another charging USB jack in there as well. Backseat space in the Forte is actually really good, so that's where I think them making it a little bit longer, and it's also a little bit taller, so that helps benefit the rear seat room there. Even though you have a little bit of a fastback profile, you don't really tell as far as interior space in the back there. So I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have about 3 inches or so to spare there, and then I have a couple inches of headroom as well, so not cramped by any means. I think someone that's even over 6 feet tall should fit comfortably back there. And then also a nice feature you have in some of the higher trims like this EX are air vents right here in the transmission tunnel area as you're looking forward. You also have bottle holders in the doors back there, and then you have a fold down center armrest, which also has two cup holders built into it and a nice softly padded armrest. It's surprising though, the backseat armrest is softer than the front seat one, so that seems a little backwards, but anyway, good to have that armrest back there. And so overall, really good amount of backseat space. Trunk space in the Forte is also excellent. It's actually pretty close to some mid-size size sedans. Certainly, you know, right in line with some of the best out of the compact class. And so it's a nice, you know, pretty wide space, a nice wide opening for the trunk lid there as well. Little cutouts in the sides of the trunk there, and it goes pretty far back. And beneath the floor there, you'll see a you know, smaller spare tire. And also those seats do fold flat in all trims. That gives you extra versatility there. All right, so start them, go for a drive. The Forte here has the same shape key as the Stinger. So you have the same nice, you know, metal on the sides here with the little buttons built into it. But this one has hard plastic instead of the nice softly padded material you have on the Stinger. It's not quite as nice as the Stinger key, but still a really cool key, much cooler than some of the other ones in the class. And of course, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here in the EX trim. If you were to go for one of the lower trims, I believe they still do have a key, but thankfully you don't have any kind of block off or anything on the steering column here, so you just have the engine start button there. So you just put your foot on the brake, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2019 Kia Forte EX trim here. So first thing you notice, well, I've been driving this for all day already here on the media drive for the Forte, but I gotta say that, you know, one thing that you notice right off the bat is you have a little bit of a higher seating position here in the Forte. I kind of wish the seat would go a little bit lower for my, you know, sportier preferences, but it's still, you know, it gives you a very good view of the road because you are sitting up a little bit higher. You have a nice large windshield, pretty thin A-pillars, good view out of the side, and a view out of the back that's also pretty good for a sedan. Another thing to notice right off the bat is, you know, it's a pretty smooth and refined ride. That's something I've been noticing all day in our excursions here, is that it's got a really smooth and comfortable ride while still handling really well, which I'll show you in a minute. But even one thing that they said that they improved here for the 2019 version is even the front window glass is like, I think 0.4 millimeters thicker, and so that helps with, you know, just making it a little more refined. It's a little bit of a thicker window glass than stuff like you see in the Civic. And I mean, not huge differences, but you know, things that you might notice if you drive the two back to back. This certainly feels very nice and refined. Also, another thing as we're pulling out here, one thing that makes itself more apparent on hills especially, but even on flat areas like this, you have Kia's new CVT, which they call an IVT for Intelligent Variable Transmission. And so instead of using rubber belts, it uses a chain belt, and so that helps with making it a little more responsive. They say it also helps with wear. You know, I'm not a CVT expert, but I will say that this feels a little more natural than some, but a little more unnatural than others. I still think I prefer the Corolla's CVT and the new Corolla IM, which has a dedicated first gear for launching, and then it goes into its CVT mode, whereas this, when you're accelerating, you still get a little bit of a disconnect, I think, a little bit of a cushion there, I guess, before you really, you know, start getting a strong linear acceleration. But I will say this CVT is very responsive. Whenever you put your foot down, even just a little bit, it will spring into action and give you kind of like a downshift, so it doesn't just keep it at 1 RPM the whole time or anything. It does react similar to an automatic, although it's not quite as strong. It doesn't feel like it's actually going into a gear. It's a little smoother than that, but you know, you get a similar sensation where you can tell the car is moving with a little more urgency than you sometimes get with some other CVTs. But I put the car into the sport mode here, and let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. Very responsive with the CVT. It immediately springs into action and gives me all that it has. So this little Forte has a 2-liter 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine that has 147 horsepower, 132 pound-feet of torque, and so 0 to 60 times haven't been shared by Kia, but it's around the 9-second range most likely. Not, you know, particularly fast, but that's basically what you expect because that's what you get with all the other competition that has very similar power, very similar weight figures. So you know, it's a pretty okay amount of power. It's enough for a commuter. It's enough to get around, you know, without fearing for your life when you're merging onto the highway or anything. You know, it has power, but you know, it just could use a little more. And I certainly think, you know, those of you that are enthusiasts that want additional pep, like I said, there is most likely going to be a turbocharged version of the Forte or a sportier version coming down the road that will probably have that 1.6 liter turbo for, like you saw in the Forte 5 SX that I reviewed earlier this year. And so, you know, I'm sure that it'll have that, and you'll have that additional pep. But for those that want a nice commuter, this engine is, you know, still pretty smooth, and you know, works well with this new CVT too. And speaking of the CVT, you can also manually shift with the gear shifter. Like I said, no paddle shifters, but you know, it's pretty responsive. So I think it has 7 simulated gears, and they're very immediate. Whenever you immediately upshift, it's immediate. I mean, so if If you didn't have the CVT slushiness to it, it would basically feel like a dual clutch, because you can see the torque just jump immediately whenever you're changing gears. And so it is very responsive. If you do want to use that, I kind of wish there's paddle shifters, because with paddle shifters, I think it'd be really quite fun, much like the Corolla IM with its CVT with paddle shifters. With that, I really was getting into it. I was like, I can see how this can be a lot of fun, even though it is a CVT. But while we're in sport mode here, in addition to the throttle being a little more responsive, you also have tighter steering, which will be handy as we go around some tighter corners here that I always go on. And let's see how it handles. So it doesn't do too bad. It's pretty impressive. So we have some Kumo 225 wide tires on here. They're not sporty Kumos, again, geared for efficiency, but they do still, grip fairly well. 225s, some others have 215s, I think, in this segment. So this is nice to have the 225s. And I will say it does kind of turn in nicely there with the nose. I think it also benefits from the fact that it's fairly lightweight. Depending on, what trim you get of the new Forte here, it can be anywhere between the mid 2,700 pound range all the way up to around 2,900 pounds. This one, again, being fully loaded, is probably closer to that 2,900, maybe even close to 3,000. But that still is pretty light, and again, right in line with a lot of the competition. And so that's what I just love about these compact sedans is, even if they don't have amazing underpinnings, you just have lightweight, which really makes it a whole lot easier to have a fun handling vehicle. And even though, you have a torsion beam rear suspension here in the regular Forte sedan, it feels really good. I don't think, I'm really missing the independent rear suspension too much, and a lot of other competition, even like the Jetta, has switched to a torsion beam for their new Jetta as well. So there are others out there that use that, and those feel good as well. I will say, speaking of the Jetta, this actually feels like it handles much better than the new Jetta to me. I personally think this is sharper. I like the steering feel better here. It is nice that the sport mode, it's got a little bit more responsiveness to it, and it feels good. It's not super connected feeling. I think it's a little, could use a little more feel, but the weight of it is pretty good in my opinion. The Forte, it's not going to be backroads carver, but I think it handles really, really well. So whenever you do happen to find yourself on a windy back road, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. It does pretty good. And I think if you did want to have a little more grip here, you could obviously swap tires. That's a very easy change you can make that will give this a lot more grip as well, even if you stick with the standard width of the 225s. But now we're in the normal drive mode, just to kind of compare with the sport, and you can tell that there's certainly more throttle response delay. It's not quite as responsive. Whenever it's in sport mode, it is very responsive with the throttle response, but here in the normal mode, you kind of sometimes wait an extra second longer than you would like. So I think if you're definitely in a sporty mode, you're going to want to put it in that sport mode. But the steering is still nice in the normal mode. Doesn't have quite as much heft, but still feels very accurate and feels pretty good. The brakes also feel pretty good as well as we're coming to a stop here. They have a good amount of travel to them, and you do have to kind of lean on a little harder than I would like in order to get some really hard braking action. But overall, they still feel pretty good, and again, are right in line with most of the others in the segment. Although stuff like the Civic, I think, has a little bit more of a sensitive brake pedal. It's a little more eager feeling to slow down than this does. But again, I'm splitting hairs here, and it still feels pretty good. But as we're going around some corners, especially whenever you slow down, then you want to speed up again. Even when you are in sport mode, it's a little, the CVT, I kind of wish, there are times where I miss, I want a normal automatic. I want normal gears. I want it to hold a certain, gear ratio, and instead it's constantly changing. And there are a few times where I've been driving and I've felt it hunting around a little more than I would like. Most of the time it is very well behaved. Again, I'm a manual lover, and you can get the Forte, thankfully, at least the base model, in a manual transmission. And hopefully, whenever the sportier version comes, that'll be available with a manual as well. So, that's the only options. You have either CVT or the manual in the base trim. If you go up to anything other than the base, you have to get this CVT, which again, I think feels better whenever you have it in the manual mode here. But in the automatic, there are a few times where I get, a little mildly annoyed with it, but not a huge deal. And again, there's most of the others in this segment have CVTs, and that's something you just have to kind of deal with in this segment if you're not willing to have the manual. But calming down here now, just cruising along on a main road. A few things about the Forte, like I said, I really love the ride. The ride quality is so smooth and definitely feels more refined than at least the Forte 5 SX that I reviewed, a little while back. This definitely Definitely feels more refined, a little more substantial feeling, just a little bit larger as well, because it is, again, a little bit of a wider and longer vehicle, although that's, very small changes. It's not like a huge change or anything, but it's just a really nice cruiser. One nice improvement about the CVT, though, is the fuel economy. Whenever you do just, chill out and cruise down a main road here, you do get pretty good fuel economy. Although, if you go for the fully loaded trim, you actually get 1 mpg less than what is the best possible fuel economy in the Forte. If you go for the base model with the automatic, that'll actually give you 31 in the city, 41 on the highway for a combined average of 35. But as we are here in the EX trim, you get 30 in the city, 40 on the highway, and 34 combined. And so still very strong fuel economy right there, with the really right up there with most of the best in the class. If you go for the manual, though, if you're curious, that gets 27 in the city, 37 on the highway, and around 31 combined. So you definitely get a little bit of a penalty there of a few mpg by going with the manual, but I still think you can't beat the engagement of the manual. I have not driven the manual in this, so I can't personally say how this new Forte feels with the manual, but I will say that manuals in general are usually a little more fun, and I did enjoy the manual in the Forte 5 SX that I had, like I said, as a press vehicle a while back. Another thing you can enjoy whenever you kind of just cruise here is in the EX trim, the fully loaded one. It has an option package which includes this new Harman Kardon stereo, which is an 8-speaker, 320-watt system. And I've sampled a little bit here over the course of the day. We've been listening to stuff through a wired-in Apple CarPlay source. It does sound pretty good. It's, again, still only an 8-speaker arrangement, still only 320 watts, so it's nice that you have the Harman Kardon technology and their speaker set up there, but it's still is nothing mind-blowing. But again, considering the class we're in, I think it's still really nice. They have a branded, upgraded stereo system. In the past, some of the others you have some other branded infotainment systems and branded stereos that aren't quite as prestigious as Harman Kardon, and so I think it's a really nice inclusion. The last thing to really mention here about the Forte is the pricing of it. So it's pretty competitive with the rest out there in this segment. Kia's always been really good with their value proposition, and there is especially certain ways that you package the Forte, depending on what features you want. You can certainly come out several thousand less than some of the others out there. But so these start right under $18,000 for the base model with the manual transmission, and then once you add on the automatic and then go up some of the higher trims, like this one as tested is around $25,200. That's very similar to the launch edition, which you can get in a special orange paint color. But so yeah, these EX ones, if you do want an EX but you don't need all the features like the Qi wireless charging pad and the ventilated seats and a few of the other features, if you can do without that, you can get an EX which has these nicer leather-like seats, and those are going to be right around 21,000. So pretty, or right under 22, I believe, like 21.9. And so at that price, it's I still think pretty competitive, to get the leather and all that type of stuff for very low 20s. Although you can still get some other stuff that even has a little bit more power, stuff like the Elantra Sport, which comes in right around that 22 to 24,000 mark. And so it just depends on again what your priorities are. If you don't need the additional power, you don't want something sporty, you just want all the toys and the nicer features here, I think you can get some of this stuff and pay less than you do in some of the competition. And so overall, I think there's a lot to like about the Forte. It's much improved in many ways. I still think obviously I would wait for a faster version with a manual and go for that. But again, if you want a really nice commuter vehicle, I think this is a really great option. Definitely something worth checking out for sure whenever you're shopping around the compact small car class. This is really nice, and again, all the nicer trim you have in here that feels and looks like metal and everything just gives a little bit of a almost a next step up over some of the other stuff out there. And so overall, like I said, I'm really impressed with it. Huge thanks once again to Kia for providing me with the new Forte here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the all new Forte in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.